Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, again, we'll be talking about the ongoing Israeli atrocities in Palestine, and the interesting part is that the whole world community, especially the Western world, is still silent. I mean, though they talk about holding meetings and sessions and talking about the ceasefire, but practically speaking, if you look at their media, it's very biased. The reporting regarding the particular situation seems to be as if everything is going wrong in Israel and nothing is happening in Gaza. One. And secondly, when you talk about the statements coming out from the United States of America, I mean, though the current president, Mr. Biden, seems to be the man who believes in humanitarian issues, is pretty much silent regarding this. You talk about the overall deaths. Today, the official figures, remember that, they are 212, 61 children, 35 women, more than 600 homes have been destroyed, countless number of buildings, including the headquarters of Al Jazeera as well as AP in that part. Then 1,500 people have been injured. The roads to various hospitals, they have also been destroyed. So you can well imagine the kind of mentality they have. And other than that, when you talk about the conflict, let's not use the word conflict. Let's not use the word disturbance in the region. This is absolute genocide. This is an absolute, the kind of mindset the Israelis have, they had, and they will have in the future as well. And you're talking about ethnic cleansing. The way they are teaching their kids, the way they are preparing their generations against the Muslims, and especially in that part, it seems that something big is about to happen, something which will be unprecedented. But let's see how the world reacts to it. Pakistan, though, along with a couple of other countries like Turkey, they have also announced to send medical assistance to the people who are injured, who are homeless. There is a lack of food, there is lack of clean drinking water. You talk about medical supplies, hardly any other country has sent those. Complete blockade of the area by the Israeli forces. And now we have also learned that most likely these soldiers would take over the area of Gaza, because the way they are assembling all along the border, it seems that the ground battle would start soon and they would be inside that area. But let's see how the world reacts and tries to stop this problem. So primarily, let me go through the major areas, and then we'll be introducing you to our guests. I mean, it says the United Nations General Assembly will meet on Monday, on May 20th in New York, exclusively to discuss Israel's ongoing offensive on the Gaza Strip. The Assembly's president for the 75th session, Volkan Bozkır, announced this. It further added that Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the foreign minister of Pakistan, says that it would be lamentable if the international community remained silent on the Palestinian situation. The bombardment in Palestine has resulted in power outrage and affected supplies of essential commodities, as I earlier mentioned. The National Assembly has passed a unanimous resolution expressing deep concern over the increasing oppression and brutalities being perpetrated against the people of the Palestine by the Israeli regime. Now another more than 58,000, now look at this number, more than 58,000 Palestinians have been displaced by the Israeli airstrikes that have destroyed or badly damaged nearly 450 buildings in the Gaza Strip. About 47,000 of the displaced people have sought shelter in 58 UN-run schools in Gaza, and they are also under attack, remember that. So this is what has been going on. I'll quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us on my right is Ambassador Nasser Ali Khan Saab, former diplomat. Sir, thank you so much, Nasser, for your time. And we also have with us Professor Dr. Nazir Hussain Saab, needs no introduction, as a senior IR expert and international relations expert. Thank you very much, sir. And we'll also be, we have with us PJ Mir Saab, Parvez Jamil Mir Saab, senior journalist, senior analyst. He's joining us on Skype. Parvez Saab, thank you so much for your time, sir. Now, sir, before we start the program, we've prepared a report. Let's see what we have to show, and plus on top, sir, we can well imagine the kind of brutalities that are going on through this particular visuals. Please.
Palestine went from this to this, and it didn't happen overnight. Up until the early 1900s, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire, a religiously diverse land where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived alongside each other. Then, things begin to change. With the start of the Zionist movement in Europe, make their way into Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories. The international community considers this illegal. The frustration of the Palestinians leads to an intifada. As a result, Hamas is born, a political movement determined to fight against Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The United States, Israel, and the PLO signed the Oslo Agreement to split the West Bank into 3 sections. Area A, under full Palestinian control. Area B, under joint Palestinian-Israeli control. And Area C, under full Israeli control. But the solution creates a problem. Area C contains the majority of West Bank's agricultural land, water, and minerals. Palestinians have limited access to these. Further peace talks prove unsuccessful. Palestinians lose hope, resulting in the second intifada, and Israel begins building walls and setting checkpoints to control Palestinian movement. It's 2005. Israel withdraws from Gaza, but continues settlements in the West Bank. Hamas gains power in Gaza and splits from the Palestinian Authority, seeing it as being too secular. The West Bank and Gaza are now under separate leadership. Israel imposes a blockade restricting any form of movement by land, air, or sea. It's 2017, and this is the current situation of Palestine. There are solutions on the table, but will we see them implemented in our lifetime?
Well, this is what we call the hostile takeover. Normally, you must have heard this word in banking, the hostile takeover. You know, if you do not pay back, they'll take your asset away. But the interesting part is over here, a country has been snatched away by the Israelis. Now, this is what the reality is. Now, starting off from you, Ambassador Nasser Saab, whatever is going on, this is not something new, sir. Starting from Sabra Shakil incident to whatever has been going on, sir. Killing of the innocent Palestinians, especially the children. And there is no comparison between the two parts, sir. They do not have any military, any air force, any navy, nothing. These are just civilians being bombarded by the Israelis, sir, on a daily basis. Look at the number of sorties being carried out on those civilian areas. The whole world is quiet. Let's not blame the West only, sir. I think the Muslim Ummah, the OIC, the Arab League, they are to be blamed. Your take, sir.
Yes, there's no doubt that throughout history there has been a problem of not only disunity amongst the Muslim Ummah, but in fact a lot of conflict and disunity amongst the Palestinians themselves. There's the PLO, then there's the PFLP, and then finally, if you remember, that
There used to
Yasser
be
Arafat.
Al-Fateh Brigade.
Yes, and Yasser Arafat agreed after the Oslo Accords to have a separate Palestinian state and essentially recognize the right of Israel to exist. But soon after the PLO government was formed, in which Yasser Arafat made Mahmoud Abbas the first prime minister, there was a tussle already going on, and as soon as Yasser Arafat died, the general narrative was that all the assistance that the PLO had received over decades from rich Arab countries was misused. It wasn't put there for the benefit of the Palestinian people, and there was a lot of corruption, as a result of which Hamas was elected, became more popular, and was elected amongst the Palestinians. Now, Hamas, unfortunately, does not recognize the right of Israel to even exist. And so then the whole process started to go backwards, in a sense. Now, why I'm saying this is that not only this, but throughout history, sometimes it was the Palestinians that were simply victims of other conflicts due to which they suffered. For instance, as it was mentioned in this little clip you played, that the Ottomans, you see, they sided with the Germans in the First World War. Otherwise, for 400 years, this area, which is known as Palestine, was ruled by the Ottomans for 4 centuries. And this was actually a southern part of what is Syria. And then when the Ottomans sided with the Germans and then they lost the war, it was basically the French and the British who came to start to divide this area. And Palestine, what is Palestine now, came under the control of the British. And then as they talk about the 1917 Balfour Declaration, etc. But during that time, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, he sided, his name was Al-Husseini, he started a resistance movement against the British. And unfortunately, close to the Second World War, about 2 or 3 years before the Second World War, there was an armed insurrection against the British, due to which he was expelled, and he went and joined the Nazis. Now, this is a person who's supposed to be a representative of the Palestinians. He goes and joins Hitler, he meets Hitler. In fact, he even fought part of the conflict, I think, in Bosnia or somewhere. But these kind of things cause tremendous harm to the Palestinians because it brings a lot of powerful forces against them. That's one thing.
This is what has happened, yeah.
The other instance I would like to quote is that in the early 1990 and 91 war, Yasser Arafat sided with Saddam Hussein. Now that, as you can imagine, in the invasion of Kuwait, if you are siding with Saddam Hussein, you are on
because Saddam had supported them so much, I mean, they had no other choice.
Sure, but now you are siding against Saddam, against those Arab states who are feeling threatened by Saddam, right? And those were your main financiers. So all that assistance dried up. So what I'm trying to say is, at times it's been conflicts of others that has unfortunately affected the people, and at times it's been wrong decisions that they have taken. And along with that, of course, there is disunity amongst them. As far as the Muslim Ummah is concerned, there was a time, late 60s to early 70s, when the oil producing countries put up an embargo and you know, did something really concrete. So instead of just giving lip service or verbally condemning something, they did something concrete. Correct. And that has a tremendous effect on this whole situation. But since then, the Ummah has been divided. And a lot of them are beholden to the Americans for their survival.
That was the time the petrodollar came in?
Yes.
Things changed?
So now, today, the situation is that, for instance, when we had this lockdown in Kashmir and we tried our best in Pakistan tried their best to go out and lobby. The first people we wanted to lobby were the OIC. And there was hesitancy in condemning India and in standing with us. So similarly, in this situation, some of the most powerful people in the Muslim Ummah are definitely hesitating in fully condemning it. The most unfortunate thing is that there is this narrative that Israel has a right to defend itself. I mean, this is, I'm sure there are reasons for Israel. When you start firing rockets towards them, they will retaliate. But at the same time, the conflict is so, it's so heavily in favor of a major brute military power. And then the way that they are coming down on Gaza is absolutely, I mean, it's almost unheard of, this cruelty.
I saw a visual of a little girl. She was not more than 4 or 5 years old, and she was crying. But because I could read the translation down there, and her parents were trying to tell her that you're safe. She said, I don't want to die. I don't want to sleep. Though I'm sleepy, but I don't want to sleep because you never know that there was going to be a bomb on our house and we'll be all dead. So, I mean, this is the kind of, and this is not the first time. I had a very long meeting once with the former ambassador to Pakistan from Palestine, and Walid Abu Ali, and he told me that 70% of the people living, Dr. Saab, in those areas, they need psychiatric help. This is exactly what has been going. Just imagine, I mean, I was giving an example yesterday that my kids, we were together in Donga Gali, and there were thunders, and those kids were so scared because of those, just the voice, But imagine you're living in a city and it's being bombarded left, right, and center with all sorts of weapons. So that is the kind of, God, I mean, this is unbelievable. Doctor, coming to you, sir. Straightforward question is that, do you believe that this is more of a political problem or this is an absolute religious issue?
No, it's not religious issue at all. In fact, where Ambassador Saab has left, I'll start from there. It is a pre-planned execution of a much larger geopolitics of the region. Let's start with Mr. Netanyahu. He could not form the government.
No, sir. He's still acting.
First and foremost, he wants to be equated with Ben Gurion, 5 times Prime Minister of Israel. And he is showing to his people because he could not form the government twice. So now his rival has been given the option to form the government. So it's a political exercise by Mr. Netanyahu to show to his people. And he said categorically that the only voice, the only language which the so-called Palestinians listen is bombardment, is violence, is attacking them. So if you choose me, then probably you can be at ease, otherwise no. 1, 2. Now see the plan. We thought and the world perceived that Trump has gone, Joe Biden has come, he is pro-democrat, he is for human rights issues. We were in illusion. There is an AIPC sitting behind Mr. President of United States of America. So that that Jewish lobby would continue to work on. At the UN, 3 times the debate on UN has remained inconclusive because the veto power has been used, and now suddenly
again
now the UN General Assembly would be condemning. See what happened to Ms. Haley? Just lone voice. Not even the European Union members supported her. That's a terrible defeat, diplomatic defeat to the United States of America. What they will show to the world. Now coming to this larger plan, when it started.
When Nikki Haley was the ambassador in the UN.
Yeah.
Sir, interestingly, that same debate, when they changed the capital, there were 8 countries in support. 8
yes.
countries like Honduras and small countries. Either people banned or they did not vote or they voted against
definitely
them.
Because
nothing happened.
Because how long you can remain silent? Okay. Now, when it started, please remember, Israel came into being on 14th and 15th night 1948. It started just 2 or 3 days before that. So please remember, Israel was born during the war. It thrived throughout the war and it will expand through the war because they would like to win over the sympathy of the people of the world that, oh, we are being attacked, this so-called issue of self-defense, etc. Now the third issue is the silence of the Arabs. One by one, all Arab states have been siding or recognizing Israel. So diplomatic support. This is first time ever in the history of the Arab League that they could not issue a joint statement because half of the Arab was supporting and half the Arab. This is a slap on the face of the Arab and the Muslim world. Now, out of the Muslim world, or so-called Muslim Ummah, which I don't prescribe to, how many states are supporting it? Turkey, Pakistan, Malaysia, Iran, Sudan, that's it. And now, good enough, I mean, Mr. Sir would know better than me, what options we have? We have very limited maneuverability in the international arena. So, time and again, if the veto, and this is the time to world to consider that whether this so-called authoritarianism in the UN Security Council could go, because 14 members are supporting something and one veto member can just throw it away. And lastly, I'm still at odds to understand that, okay, Hamas has been bombarded, Gaza has been bombarded, where is Al-Fatah? Why Al-Fatah is not doing anything? Where is Egypt, which is bordering with Hamas and Gaza? Why they are not doing anything? Where is this so-called Hezbollah?
What do you expect from General Sisi, sir? Do you expect that? Do you expect that?
I wanted to, because
I remember, sir, Hamas had a legitimate government, correct?
Yes.
They were thrown out.
Yes, within 1.5 years.
Muslim Brotherhood had a legitimate government in Egypt. What happened to them? What happened during 2011, that Arab Spring? I mean, they just diluted everything.
Then Faisal,
they have their own control, they have their own people there.
We should not be shedding the crocodile tears, because it is happening, it is there. I mean, you have quoted the figures that 50,000 people have been displaced and this and that. You recall your son going to, I was just going to a road and I was stopped suddenly by some policemen and I felt so wrong, so sad that why I'm being stopped. So in Palestine, in Gaza, daily these things are happening.
Kids are picked up,
until
thrown into the jails.
There is only one solution, and that solution is, if you are not united, you are in fact encouraging terrorism. You are in fact encouraging the non-state actors to revive. In fact, you are encouraging.
What other options?
There is no other option. So, if you are thinking is a diplomatic action, Mr. Saab knows it, and you have shown the clip that for the last 70 years, no diplomatic action is there. And it is on record that the Israeli leaders have said categorically that between Jordan and Israel, there is no third state. So, what we are weeping for? And you've seen the dots on the West Bank. There is no place left, only Gaza, which is a very small scattered area. It is left. And
I think it's not bigger than Pindi Islamabad put together, correct, sir?
It is one of the most concentrated area. And if you bombard, and then they have silenced the media. You mentioned Al Jazeera, AP. There is no reporting coming on. Only 2 or 3 reporters are there who are controlling this.
Nick Robinson, for example, of CNN.
Everything.
I mean, I really used to look up to that character, but what a biased reporting.
But Faisal, there are people of conscience. You know, one clip which you might have seen, one reporter on Israeli channel had spoken.
In English?
Yes, in English. She burst out. She said, no, this is genocide, as you were saying.
And what was the line under that, most likely she is no more there?
Oh, that's not the case. But
I got your point.
But at least there are conscious people, there are conscientious people who want to voice their concerns.
There are sane voices all over the world, sir, but the point is they should be heard. But nothing is happening. Sir, coming to you, PJ Mir Saab, now, first of all, your take on the current situation, sir. And you've been following this and you've been writing about it. I've seen so many of your shows on these particular issues. Where are we heading, PJ Saab? It seems that this is a never-ending story. Palestinians will be crushed at the end of the day, sir. The whole world is silent. Nothing is going to happen. If you remember, sir, when the last time the similar situation erupted, the Turkish, they sent this flotilla ship, and we all know what happened to that.
You're quite right, Faisal. Actually, this is a very complex situation. I was in Israel in 2006. I covered the war there. And then, of course, I'll tell you what the local people spoke about the war. None of them was in favor of the war, but of course, it was a war against the Hezbollah. Now here, what the situation is, which I really got into it, when I interviewed Shimon Peres in Tel Aviv, he said, look, we were heading towards peace. Yasser Arafat was all there, and he was willing to, accept Israel as a state, and we were willing to accept Palestine, and things were just moving. And then all of a sudden, things changed. He says, I became the most hated man in Israel because I gave back 473 villages in Gaza, and people were dead against me, and I was totally out in the political wilderness. Fine. Now, what had happened was that after Yasser Arafat, the situation totally changed in Palestine. They didn't want to accept Israel. And of course, as you see, the death of Yasser Arafat, again, was in dubious circumstances. What happened later on, we don't know. But this hatred, after 2006 onwards, with 2 years of blockade, then we saw the fiercest attack of the Israelis on Palestine in 2008 and 9. 300 children were killed, 1,600 people were injured, and they were totally displaced. I mean, you look at the centers like Al-Shifa and others, they were totally demolished and destroyed. Now, why was that? Again, none of the, as the colleagues here in the panel said, no Muslim Ummah came up. They don't want to talk. Yet, the people who wanted to talk, now they're part of the conglomerate, they're part of the nexus. For example, Saudi Arabia, for example, UAE. Now, have you heard anything apart from Turkey, Pakistan, Iran? Iran, I would understand, yes, because they have the satellite fixed on Iran, 24/7, which I saw in the control and command center in Tel Aviv for any imminent attack. But what about the other Islamic states? What do we call this Muslim Ummah? Although OIC have given a very strong statement for the first time this year. But again, that's not enough. Look, the only situation when we speak and discuss this issue is sanctions. Who's willing to put sanctions on Israel? Who's going to, put any sanction on Kashmir? Kashmir and Palestine, more or less the same, and except for a few geographical, I guess, differences, the incidences are the same. So what do we need to do now? Do we go a full-out war? No, that is not the answer. Because today, I think the only way forward is basically acceptance of what Palestine is. Today, Palestinian conflict is more known rather than the occupation of Israel. No one speaks about occupation of Israel.
Exactly.
You look at 1947, look at Haifa, look at 48. It moves on from Haifa, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, all part of the Palestine, now being converted and gradually taking over, including Gaza. So why? What is the reason? This is a systematic, taking over of that land by particularly with the help and aid of the Americans. And of course, what Donald Trump said, and he brought Jerusalem in the fold, is a clear indicator. Even Joe Biden, who says, look, I'm a Zionist, but it isn't necessarily that I have to be a Jew. So, the indicators are all there. And what they don't understand is that, like one of the panelists said, we are breeding future terrorists. If you do not stop and resolve this conflict, this will go worldwide. You look what happened in 1974 in the Olympics. People will come out. Believe me, we condemn it, we condone it. It shouldn't happen. But when you put, as they say, when you push a cat against a wall, it'll show its claws. So today, it's a time where we need to sit down, think rationally, sanely to resolve this issue. Now, why is it all of a sudden this thing crops up and India and Pakistan, oh, well, we'll go on the normal route? I don't think so. I think there's a master plan on this that to control us and at the same time open another theater. And in this theater, if I tell you, if the European Union doesn't wake up, we are heading towards a disaster. Americans, we know where their stance is. You've seen the vice president, how she spoke. You saw the United Nations rep, how she spoke. So we know their stance. But we need to muster international humanitarian support in order to get things on the right path. Because no one speaks about the genocide, what is happening and has happened in Kashmir. No one speaks about the killings which are going on an every day. And let me tell you, I was driving on the Gaza coast, and all of a sudden there were pot shot firing on the car on which I was traveling with the spokesman of the then Prime Minister Olmert, and we took cover. Now, I told that guy, I said, listen, you are the spokesman of the Israeli Prime Minister, but this is what ground reality is. You got to put them in the fold. If you don't do it, they will continue doing it. Hence, now they've got a wall from Tel Aviv onwards, right up to Jerusalem. So there's a huge wall, so there's no port shots. But then they'll come across with Scud attacks. I remember the Scud attacks, which were taken where the nuclear reactor is in Haifa. It took about a month and a half to drain out, but they were still continuing. And had one of the, that nuclear station blown up, well, I tell you, all hell would have been loose. So to avoid these conflicts, Faisal, we need to be talking internationally with serious people. Where is this 1948 resolution of United Nations? Where is it for where Israel has to accept it? No one. I mean, the occupation, the colonization is itself against the Geneva Convention. So who is speaking about it? I think it's all lip sync. We've got to talk seriously, and negotiation is the only answer. Confrontation, military confrontation is not. And right now what we need is ceasefire. The first thing which we need to do is ceasefire, bring in any medical aid, and let's look at the sufferings of the people. Otherwise, we're heading to a major world disaster. Muslims, they're emotional, they're not practical, and God help them if something again happens like 67 or any other event. Believe me, we're heading toward a major catastrophe.
Absolutely, Peter Saab, very serious thought. Ambassador Saab, another issue, and that is about, obviously we do understand about the humanitarian issue, that is there, and that's what should be the first and the foremost priority. But sir, when it comes to ceasefire, both the sides should be blamed for that, because neither they are stopping, right? The problem is that this Hamas, supported by certain countries, and then the proxies of Iran, to be very honest, they are there, sir. Don't you think, I mean, these proxies are also spoiling the original agenda, sir? And they, instead of a positive role, they have played a negative role. Because, if you have fired whatever number, maybe 2,000, those homemade kind of rockets, you ended up killing only 10 Israelis, right, sir? But in return, what they did is right in front of you. So this is counterproductive.
Absolutely.
From my point of view.
Absolutely.
Because precious lives are important. I mean, look at these visuals on television. So these are not normal. I mean, a normal human can't even look at those visuals for more than 5-10 minutes. And these are censored ones. The ones which I have, I wish I could show. I mean, you will just go crazy, sir, because pieces of kids. Just imagine, hand is there, leg is there, half skull is somewhere else. This is exactly what is happening. They should realize also, sir, because maybe the Hamas members are not being killed. They are attacking the civilians. Whatever sort of news coverage they used to get in their favor, that will not be there for another God knows how many years. That building is gone. And you know how much money is required, how much approvals would be required to set up another station there, whether it's for AP or it's for Al Jazeera or TRT for that matter, sir.
Yeah, you see, you're absolutely right. I'm sure when Hamas fires a barrage of rockets, this is not the first time they're doing it.
Yeah.
They know exactly what kind of reaction you'll get from the other side. This has happened several times before. So you are absolutely right that it's counterproductive. And if you look at the map, the countries that surround Israel, almost entirely, as far as public opinion is concerned, they are almost entirely hostile. You can start from Pakistan and go down to Sudan and all, and everything in between, okay? But in order to survive, obviously, Israel has to retaliate much harder just to deter an occurrence like this happening again. In 2011, Hamas kidnapped a soldier, an Israeli soldier. Now, there were negotiations for the release of that soldier. Eventually,
when the Israelis were destroying those tunnels, I guess?
Yeah, in 2011.
Okay.
And in the exchange for that one soldier, they released 1,027 prisoners, out of which 280 prisoners were on life sentence for violent crimes. So what did this message give you? The life of one Israeli to us is worth 1,000 of you. Now, sometimes I'm absolutely baffled at why these people make these attacks at the most sensitive times. This problem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque incident took place on the 27th of Ramadan, Laylatul Qadr, but the problem started way back on the 13th of April, which is like almost 3 weeks before. And you know what it started with. And then slowly these incidents were escalating. But primarily, there was very little loss of life in April. There were mobs facing each other, fighting each other. And if you remember, there was this speech that the Israeli president wanted to give, and the Israeli police moved into the mosque and cut off all the audio equipment so that the azan may not disturb the speech of the president. So obviously this is where protests first started from. And then there were small incidents, like social media, you saw a young Palestinian beating up one of those Orthodox Jews, and this went viral, and then other copycats did a similar thing, and then of course it slowly, but even in April, there was another organization that fired a few rockets into Israel. And that's what I find baffling. Do they expect Israel to capitulate from those rockets? No. The response is going to be much heavier and indiscriminate. And the result is the death of 60 children. They don't care. When I say to you that they were willing to exchange 1,027 prisoners for one soldier.
It really doesn't make any difference.
What they are doing, and this is not the first time they've done it, they are telling you that if you kill one Israeli, we will come and we'll blow up your buildings, we'll use all kinds of ammunition, the most horrific things that, we will let hell loose on you. They should have learned a lesson. So sometimes I think...
though that emotional part needs to be more of a sensible approach. I mean, there has to be a sensible approach, basically. But Nasser, one thing, before I move on to Dr. Saab, is that, do you think that in future, Gaza could be occupied by the Israelis, so they would send their troops in? Because if they want to neutralize Hamas, that is the option they have.
Well, even if they do occupy Gaza, I believe that at the end of the day, they will be compelled at some point to give land to the Palestinians. Okay, the international community will not accept that you throw all the Palestinians into the sea. The Palestinians will not go away. So my point is...
So they are already living in makeshift setups.
But there have been...
Most of them are living in schools made by the United Nations.
Understand.
Almost 56,000 people.
Yes, but the solution, as Mr. P.J. Mir was saying, solution does not lie in violence. The solution lies in peace, in peaceful overtures, in lobbying, and in perhaps sanctions.
All right.
In boycotts and things like that, to put pressure. And then to lobby organizations, human rights organizations, democratic institutions, Congress in the United States, all these people, you will find sympathy. There was a huge demonstration in Trafalgar Square, and the Labour Party leadership was there. Should we not be lobbying those people? Half of Britain is voting Labour. So there is a lot of sympathy there. And why is it that we only come into action when there is a huge crisis? This problem we should be working on throughout. Even when there isn't a major crisis, our aim should be slowly to lobby these people to bring both the sides towards peace, because I do believe that Israel would also like to live peacefully. I'm sure that they don't want rockets or the fear of Iran and all these things. So I'm pretty sure that if given the right conditions, they will make a move. Yes, somebody mentioned Netanyahu. Yes, he came into power on a very violent agenda. And every time that we've been closer to peace, it has been either Yitzhak Rabin, the Labour Party, or Ehud Barak. And every time Netanyahu would come, the process would be reversed. He would have a very belligerent attitude. So that is there. But I'm sure the Israeli people themselves will realize the dividend of peace and of living peacefully, not living in fear all the time, and the opportunities of economic growth when you are surrounded by these markets. If you are able to live peacefully with these people, then you will open yourself up to all the opportunities that exist around.
Absolutely, and that could be a win-win situation for everyone.
Indeed.
Now, Dr. Saab,
No, I have a different opinion.
please go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, sure.
Best to start with your due reverence. First and foremost, in the CIA map, which was issued in 2015, the Palestinian state is under the sea. Please remember. The Palestinian state is under the sea. I was saying straight as an academic. So there is no future Palestinian state existence in the world, 1. 2. Israel is neo-colonizing the entire Palestinian area, and nobody is there to stop them. Diplomacy had lived its life for 70 years. They would not listen to any diplomacy whatsoever. Now the only resolution, the only solution left is, if the Muslim world, the so-called Muslim Ummah has a spine, create a unified force like you have created ICMSC, the International Muslim Ummah Force to fight terrorism. What terrorism is left there?
So we all know what it is meant for.
We all know.
Yeah.
If you want to help the Palestinians, otherwise sooner or later, this Gaza would be gone forever. Please remember, now you see the dots on...
This is the beginning.
Yeah, this is the beginning. And please remember, between Gaza and Israel, there is no third state. It's the sea. You remember in 2010, the Turkish had sent a symbolic flytola to Gaza. What happened with it? They have to come back. So I think there is no diplomatic solution. The only person who signed the peace deal with the Palestinians, he was assassinated, he was killed. I don't remember his name, probably Shimon Peres. He was killed because in Israel, the only macho politics is workable. There is a very less people in Israeli political scene. Only there is a one political party, which probably Shas or Israeli Religious Party, which has only 8 seats, but it controls the entire Knesset, the Israeli parliament. So they don't want to be seen as weak, subservient. Now, if you're saying ceasefire, please, who started the violence? It was not the Hamas who started. Hamas has to retaliate. Hamas had been retaliating.
But what you're talking about is that retaliation from Hamas is productive or not?
No, it's not. The Hamas,
is it yielding the results?
Please,
no, sir.
Please remember, it is not yielding the result. But I'm sorry to use this idiom in Persian.
Because if I know, sir, if I'll throw a stone, and I will end up receiving 100 bullets, and my family is here, sir. So I will not.
Faisal, Israelis, Jews, and Zionists want this to be escalated. They are provoking you, and you provoked. And once you are provoked, you want to increase the canvas of this war.
This is exactly what is happening.
As probably PJ Mir mentioned, they are focusing on certain countries in the Middle East, Syria, Iran, Turkey. They want to expand the horizon, as Mr. Saddam Hussein tried to expand the 1990-91 war. So Israel wants that someone would come for help, and they would expand the horizon of the war into the larger Middle Eastern region. So if the ceasefire is not the solution, yes, first and foremost is until unless Israel is not realized that they are doing whatever they are doing is wrong, it's not humanly acceptable, it would not have. And the only power in the world is the United States of America. No human rights organization, no international public opinion, no Trafalgar or Democrat conventions would be taking in. Until unless United America pass the resolution, put the sanctions, it would not be stopped.
Mir Saab, your take, sir. Remedies, solutions, way forward. Mir Saab, can you put on your, can you switch on your mic, sir? Yeah, now it's clear.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay. Well, look, first of all, Israel doesn't accept Palestine because it sees it as a resistance against the Israeli state. Now, that's one. Now, when they fight, they say they don't fight an army, a state's army. They're fighting guerrillas and resistance and terrorism. let me give you a narrative. I was in the command and control center in Tel Aviv. It's like a huge James Bond sort of a screen. And as I said earlier on, there's a satellite which is totally in focus over Iran, that in the event if they attack, they know how to respond. I was seeing rockets coming in from Lebanon from residential areas. I've seen rockets coming in from Red Cross vehicles, and their response time was 1 minute and 30 seconds. And they were hitting those spots where civilians were there, and they were being killed. Civilians who had no part of the conflict between Israel and of course Lebanon. But this is how it was, a guerrilla warfare. And then, as what Shimon Peres said, he says, when I gave back 473 villages, what did I get in return? Rockets. And when I got rockets, what did you expect from the people in Israel? I have interviewed numerous people. I'll send you those copies. Numerous people. No one is for the war. They want to live in peace. On the contrary, they were complaining against their government that, look, all we had to do was just go across to Lebanon, have a good time, then come back, and that's it, because that's how we could afford. Now, their playground is all down the drain. So what really is the answer is peace, and peace through a professional, powerful force. I can only see Russia, I can only see China to come in and intervene. Why? Because Americans, we know their stance too clearly. Because if they had any feelings, or if they had any, let's say, love for life, well, they wouldn't have gone into Vietnam like that, and they wouldn't have gone, in other catastrophes. So what we really need to do is the Muslim, I think, I wouldn't call it Ummah, but a Muslim group of good friends, powerful friends, they need to get together and look towards peace. Because, look, you cannot continue fighting. You cannot. We've seen 70 years of fighting at our own doorstep. We've seen 70 years of fighting there. How long are we going to continue like this? 140 years in two conflict areas, and look what is happening. Loss of life. So is there any sane person around? Is there any, sensible person who can really look into it? I even asked once Henry Kissinger. I said, Mr. Kissinger, you've been part of the Kashmir deal. How come we're not facing it? And he laughed. He says, I've been at it 40 years and I don't see a solution. Would you believe that?
Oh.
This is during Prime Minister Shaukat Aziz's visit in New York. Now, why is it that people are not taking us seriously? You get 2 birds or 3 child, who get missing in Europe. The media takes over like, there's some human disaster. And yet we are losing lives in Palestine. We're losing lives in Kashmir. And yet the international media is no more. No more at all. Why? Because it is being influenced by international powerful forces. Why was Al Jazeera's office, just bombed out? Why? What was the reason? Simply because you had suspicion that Hamas was there. Look, Hamas will do what it has to do. But then, as what Ambassador Nasser said, well, there'll be reactions. So we don't want to get into that action and reaction situation, because we got to look at the, safeguarding the civilians. And safeguarding the civilians on all sides. Let's be very practical about it. And how do we do that is by getting sensible, serious people, sitting in mediation and talks.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, anyway, PJ Mir Saab, thank you so much, sir, for your presence in the show. It was a pleasure having you, Nasir Saab, and thank you so much, Dr. Nazir Saab. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.